Today I'm so excited because I will share with you another part of my Shabbat prep, how I am able to prepare challah for Shabbat every week. As a full-time working mom with small kiddos, I will share all my tips, tricks, and hacks to have a perfect challah every time, easily and smoothly every week. And if you like this kind of content, all about how as a busy woman you can still make easy and delicious kosher recipes, have fun preparing for Shabbat and the holidays, as well as being part of an amazing supportive community, helping each other to have a more productive and more meaningful life, please consider subscribing, as I would love to have you be part of our amazing FRUM IT UP family. Let me put on a pretty tichel and let's jump into it. My first step to get the most delicious challah is to have the right ingredients. So I will bring you shop with me for the secret ingredients for the perfect challah. I always use my own challah recipe that is easy, delicious, foolproof, and works by hand in a bread machine, left to rise overnight, and with a mixer. And of course, I will leave my recipe in the description box below for my 5 pounds of flour recipe and also my 4 cups of flour Shabbat challah recipe. The first ingredient is of course the flour. There are so many flours, whole wheat, spelt, but avoid at all costs a self-rising flour, as it will never give you a good challah. Also avoid regular flour, the gluten content is too low and it will yield a very dense, cakey challah. What I use is bread flour or high gluten flour, as it will yield the most beautiful and airy challah. This is a good one, but my favorite is this one, which has about 18% gluten content. I also heard great things about King Arthur flour. Let me know in the comments below, what do you use as your go-to flour? I like to buy fresh, good quality, large eggs. They will help the challah to be airy. I always buy the 30 eggs package, as it becomes way cheaper than the dozen. Here it's almost 50% off. How about you? In your part of the woods, is there a big difference between 30 eggs and a dozen? I would love to know. The other key ingredients is the yeast. The best results, especially if I do the overnight challah or the all-day challah, is what is called traditional yeast. I did not have great result with the instant yeast in general, and more specifically when I do the all-day challah or overnight challah, often the challah would crack open or not rise properly at all. The next ingredient is oil. I like to take a neutral oil. My favorite is sunflower oil, as shown by my little helper, but canola oil is perfect too. Olive oil and corn oil will make a heavier and flatter challah. As a side note, always verify that your oil is kosher. This oil was kosher for years and now it's not kosher anymore. I already have at home the rest of the ingredients, salt, sugar, and water, so I will put away all the ingredients that I bought today and I will use them on Wednesday, as it is my challah day in my weekly Shabbat prep routine. On Wednesday morning before I go to work, I will add in a bowl my sugar, warm water, and also my yeast. I always keep my yeast in the freezer to help the yeast stay active. Another thing that I always do is to weigh my ingredients to have the best results. I will leave the link to my scale in the description box below. I add the yeast to the water and sugar mixture and I mix everything. I cover it and set it aside for 5 to 8 minutes until it bubbles. In the mixer, I will put the flour, and when I pour in the flour, I pray for God to sustain us physically and spiritually. I add the sugar, and I pray again for God to bring us sweetness in our life. And finally, when I add the salt, I pray for God to bring us only reasons to have tears of joy. Then I mix everything. As you know by now, before using any eggs, I will check them to make sure that there is no blood spot in the egg yolk, as it would render the egg non-kosher. I will repeat the process for the 6 eggs that I will use for my 5 pounds of flour recipe. As I add the eggs one by one, little by little in the recipe, I pray to God to give my husband, my children, my family, myself, and you as well a good life, as the egg represents the circle of life. At this point, the dough should look like wet sand. I add the oil, and when I add the oil, I pray that everything goes smoothly in our life. Then, of course, I mix everything thoroughly. At this point, I make sure the yeast is proofed, and if my yeast does not look like this big cake of yeast, I know my challah will not rise, and I would not hesitate to toss the non-cakey yeast and use another batch of yeast altogether. I add the yeast mixture and pray to God to help us rise up to be our best self and rise above all the challenges. I will then mix everything together until it is fully incorporated. I then add warm water. As water is compared to Torah and life, I pray we should always have a peaceful life filled with Torah. I don't know about you, but I truly believe that the intentions we have when we are baking and cooking are transmitted in our food. My grandmother always said, cooking is love you can taste. What do you think? I mix the dough until it is fully combined, and at this point the dough is like a shaggy dough. It has a bit of consistency when I press it between my fingers and still a bit tacky. And I am sure at this point that the dough is perfect for me to be able to knead it for about 8 minutes on low speed. After that kneading period, I will look at the dough, and as you can see, it is such a different dough. It is much stretchier and nice, and after fighting for a few minutes to remove the dough from the bowl, as you can see it is quite tacky, I will put it on a clean surface and I will form what is called a boule. The goal of the boule is to decrease the surface that is in contact with the air, and at the same time to increase the tension on the surface of the challah. Both will give you the highest rise and the fluffiest challah. Once that the boule is done, I'm going to transfer it in a clean, chemical-free recycling bag, and before closing it, I will add some oil. Here I'm using some avocado oil, but any oil will do, and the goal is to keep your challah nice and moist. I will close the recycling bag, making sure that there is no air left, as the more air will be in contact with the yeast and the dough, the less rise you will have. I will simply knot it, and I will leave it aside until I'm ready to use it after work, but of course I will leave it not at room temperature but in my refrigerator. When I come home from work, I will let the dough warm up for about 20 to 30 minutes in the oven on the bread-proof setting. Once it is warmed up, I will deflate the dough. Is deflating the dough as satisfying for you as it is for me? Let me know in the comments below. From there, I fold the dough onto itself. I will also preheat my oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I do the blessing of hafrashat challah with separation of the challah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu le'afrish challah teruma. I then separate a piece of challah and I say, Are zo challah. The piece of challah I removed cannot be eaten, and I will keep it in the freezer until all the pieces of challah will be burned with all the chametz before Passover. I start separating the challah in equal parts to make sure the challah will bake evenly and the braiding will be as regular and beautiful as possible. I like using braids that are 120 grams each, and I take the piece of dough and roll it onto itself. I put it in the recycling bag because one of the best tricks to make sure the strands stay beautiful and will not break during the baking is to keep them from drying out. Therefore, I keep them covered all the time. The same holds true for the bowl. It is always covered. I continue to separate the challah in a 120 grams portion, placing the newer one in front so I know to use the one from the back first as they were proofed for a longer time. Today I will share with you how I do a 5-strand twisted challah, a classic 6-strands challah, and a round challah. I take my ball of dough and flatten it with the rolling pin to remove all the bubbles. This way it will avoid for the strand to break open while baking. I roll the strand onto itself to form a cigar. It will create a seam that I will pinch on the top and on both ends of the cigar. I will put it aside and continue with the other balls doing the same thing. If I don't have a rolling pin, I will flatten the dough with my fingers to remove the bubbles and tuck and roll it tightly onto itself. I will pinch the seams and roll it again. Once that all the strands are rolled, I will re-roll them one last time before I place them side by side to make them as equal as possible in length and in girth. Then I'm ready to start braiding my challah. The first one is a new one and I call it the twist and fun. I take the second strand and pass it over the third one. Then I take the fifth strand and I will put it next to the first strand. Then I take the first strand and put it over the second strand. And then I restart. I take the second strand, put it over the third, the fifth next to the first, and then the first one over the second one. I repeat the process until I have braided all the way through the bottom. The bottom is always a bit tricky for any challah, and the way that I do it is that when it is too challenging, I will simply roll the ends together to make a nice smush and tuck it under the challah. And I will do exactly the same thing for the top part, which is to roll it together and then tuck it. I love this intricate design and I would love to know, how do you find it? Is it a yay or a nay? I put the challah on a cookie sheet covered with a parchment paper and I will cover it once again with our recycling bag. I will do another one like that and then I will start the third one, which is going to be a classic 6 strands challah. This challah might seem daunting, but it is always the same 2 moves. Second strand to the top, first strand to the middle. Then I change side. Second to the top, then first in the middle. Once again, second to the top, first in the middle. And I would encourage you to see next the video that my daughters did to braid any challah with any number of strands with the song that is absolutely unforgettable. I move my challah up and it looks like a little squid, and I continue braiding until the end. And as I told you before, when the end becomes too tight, too complicated, I simply roll it onto itself and tuck it underneath. With my 5 pounds of flour challah recipe, I will be able to make 2 6 strands challah. I will cover them with my recycling bag and put them aside to rise at room temperature. The last challah is the cutest one and the simplest one. I will take 5 strands of challah and I will braid one side like a regular 3 strands challah, and then I will go to the other side and braid it again. I will continue until the bottom and then I will tuck the braid onto itself and it will form the most delicious round challah. Like the other chalot, I will place it on a parchment paper, cover it, and let it rise. It is time to make the egg wash, and of course, we have to check the eggs to make sure that there's no blood spot. And the best way that I found to make the creamiest egg wash is to put the egg in a mason jar, then add about 2 tablespoons of water inside the jar and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. I close the jar and then let it rip. I shake it for about 10 to 15 seconds. After that time, I will be left with the most delicious and creamy egg wash, and I will apply it with my favorite silicone basting brush from Zillis, and I will leave the link in the description box below, but look at these bristles. One of the secrets to apply the egg wash that I found with a lot of trials and error is to really take my time and apply the egg wash in every nook and cranny. This will ensure that the challah will have this nice, even golden color everywhere. In some chalot, especially the most braided one, I will add some sesame seeds. I add a lot of sesame seeds, to be honest. And I would love to know, do you add sesame seeds on your chalot? Do you leave it plain? Let me know in the comments below. I then put the chalot in the oven for 30 minutes. Once they are fully baked or the internal temperature has reached between 190 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, I will place them on a cooling rack for about 30 minutes. I have to admit that during that time it happened to me more than once to just stand there and admire these beauties, and thank God that I'm able to do this beautiful mitzvah of hafrashat challah, to make challah as well every week. Did it ever happen to you to just stand and stare at something you have just created? Let me know in the comments below. Once that the challah are fully cooled down, I will put them in freezer Ziploc bags and I will remove all the air inside the Ziploc bag to avoid freezer burn. Once that I have individually wrapped every single challah, making sure that I took out all the air, I will put them in the freezer and leave them there until we're ready to enjoy them on Shabbat, and they will taste as delicious and be as fresh as if they were just baked. Thank you so much for being here. It means the world to me. Know that in my book, you are simply irreplaceable. Since you are here until the end, write in the comments, I love challah, so I know I was not alone. If nobody told you today, know that you are loved and you are enough just the way you are. Until next time, stay safe, stay blessed, and don't forget to FRUM it up.